Hey everyone, I'm LockhartQT, and today I'll be discussing the development for the next Mass Effect game and the very real possibility that it could be releasing with the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox console as well as PC. So if you're new around here, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, subscribe, and share for more Mass Effect content as well as bioware content and gaming content in general on this channel. So if you're a Mass Effect fan like myself, you've probably come to the realization that we're probably going to be waiting a while for the next game in the RPG series, with some gaming insiders such as Jeff Grubb speculating on a 2029 release date from what they've heard within bioware themselves, which is absolutely wild to even consider the fact that the game was revealed back in 2020 at the Game Awards in December and it's not going to release, until 9 years later potentially. But to this end, it looks increasingly likely that the next game in the Mass Effect series will probably be coming out on the next generation of hardware, being the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox console, with Series X2 or whatever it's going to be called. As back in last year, both Sony and Microsoft teased plans for their next console updates to come out in 2028. So the years and date absolutely line up nicely for the next game being a next generation game. And this is going to be a brutal wait, as we haven't had a new Mass Effect game since obviously 2017's Mass Effect Andromeda, not counting of course the Legendary Edition, which was a collection of the original trilogy of Mass Effect games, obviously Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3. If you haven't played the Legendary Edition, in my opinion it's the best way to play the original games. I really recommend going checking it out if you haven't played it. It's one of my favourite games at least. And the Legendary Edition of course came out in 2021, and only having the Legendary Edition to hold us over until 2029 maybe is rough, and I can't imagine how Dragon Age Dreadwolf fans feel right now, as they've been similarly waiting around 10 years for the next installment in the Dragon Age series. Dragon Age Inquisition came out in 2014 and it's now 2024, which is again a bit wild to think about. Obviously BioWare in that time released Andromeda and Anthem, so again we're going to have to wait and see what's happened. There's been obviously a lot of mismanagement at BioWare over the years. The fact that obviously Anthem failed, they put all of their cards and their chips into Anthem failed, they then devoted a whole development team at BioWare into essentially fixing Anthem, and they were going to be making, I believe it was called Anthem Next or Anthem 2.0, which then got cancelled outright, and then all of their development team was then pushed over to Dragon Age Dreadwolf, which hopefully is coming out this year. It might be next year, but again we're going to have to wait and see. But back in November of last year, I covered it as well as other Mass Effect content creators covered the fact that obviously Jeff Grubb on the Xbox podcast, I'll have probably a clip of it on screen right now, suggested that from what he'd heard internally and was speculating on the fact that the game wouldn't be out until 2029. And we also know from leaked Microsoft documents that I also covered on the channel that the PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox could be out in 2028, giving the PS5 and Xbox Series X essentially an 8-year development, an 8-year cycle of consoles, which is pretty normal. I mean, the PS4 obviously came out in 2013 and then ended in 2020, so it's 7 years. So I think having maybe the PS5 and the next Xbox potentially be 8 years sounds about right. I think 2027 sounds a bit more likely, considering inflation and the fact that technology is progressing so quickly. Again, we'll have to wait up, but obviously matching up these two timelines suggests that the next BioWare game, being obviously Mass Effect, whatever the next game is going to be called, that we've got no idea what it's called yet, is most likely going to be a next-gen game. Now for the next Mass Effect game, they could do something similar to how Nintendo sometimes do it, where they have something called a cross-gen game. You've probably seen it on, things like Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War and other games that came out, but Nintendo are probably the most famous company for doing it in my opinion. A really good example is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, the fact that it was being developed for the Nintendo GameCube, and then obviously the Wii was coming out, so they decided to essentially develop the game last minute for the Wii as well, and it came out on the GameCube but obviously launched on the Wii as well. So you know, there's that as well. And also another Legend of Zelda game that Nintendo did this with was obviously Breath of the Wild. The fact that it was developed for the Wii U and then later came out on the Switch, it was a launch game for the Switch. So I feel like BioWare and EA could easily do this with the next Mass Effect game, where it's developed for PS5, Xbox Series X, PC, but then it comes out same day, PlayStation 6 and whatever the next Xbox console is going to be called. And if we look at news at the minute, we've obviously heard from EA themselves that the next Mass Effect game is still in pre-production, and we know that Dragon Age Dreadwolf is getting some kind of big reveal, gameplay reveal this summer. So it's obvious at this point that either Dragon Age Dreadwolf is out or about to release. It's around that time at least. And the good news is that the rumoured will happen this year. I've seen it rumoured pretty much everywhere. I'll probably do a video on it in the future, that Dreadwolf is most likely coming out in fall of this year. I think the very latest we'll probably see Dreadwolf, if it's not delayed outright, is probably March 2025. I feel like that's a good place to reveal it, to release it rather. But the bad news is this doesn't really make the Mass Effects news any better. BioWare used to ship games out really quickly. I think Mass Effect 3 was really famous for having a bit of a rush to development, and the fact that they had to cut just so much from that game to get out so quickly, just because Mass Effect 2 at the time was one of the best video games on the market, and it just did really well financially. So EA was sort of pressuring BioWare, look, you've got to release Mass Effect 3, you've got to do it now. And I've got to say that obviously Andromeda didn't really come out too far behind. It was 6 years after obviously Mass Effect 3. I think it was 5 or 6 years after, was it? Am I getting that right? I think what was it, 5 years after Mass Effect 3? I can't do basic maths today, but there you go. So it's kind of a bit weird that all this has happened. I mean, like I said earlier, the only reason this has happened is that Dragon Age Dreadwolf has gone through absolutely development hell, and the overall project has been rebooted a few times, as well as obviously Anthem. EA and BioWare put so much time, effort and manpower into Anthem, and the fact that it just failed, it caused the entire studio to restructure. And then obviously you've had the layoffs at EA and BioWare quite recently. BioWare, in my opinion, have been mismanaged for almost around 6 years, 5 years now. So it's nice to see that BioWare is hopefully getting back on track with obviously the recent news that they've got more veterans from the original trilogy in the older days at BioWare working on both Dragon Age Dreadwolf and the next Mass Effect game. But yeah, that's pretty much the video for today, to be honest. I think there's obviously the elephant in the room, which is worst case scenario, that if the next game's development, if it goes really well, I think that the next Mass Effect game will launch 2027. That's if, corners are cut and if everything goes well with Dreadwolf. I think if Dreadwolf does really well, both critically and money-wise, I think they will sort of say to BioWare, look, you need to get the next Mass Effect out a bit quicker. And hopefully they don't rush it, because I think that's probably, worst thing ever. But if Dreadwolf bombs, and I mean it bombs, like it doesn't sell very well and it gets like a 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, I think that things will be looking bleak for the next Mass Effect game. I think it could be either cancelled outright or it could be delayed all the way into the 2030s, which would be, I don't even want to think about that as a scenario at the moment, but again, it's something that we do have to discuss. So thank you very much for watching the video today, and tell me in the comments below, what do you think about obviously this news? Do you think that the next Mass Effect game will be a PlayStation 6 and whatever the next Xbox console is going to be called? Do you reckon it will be a next generation title? And do you think that the next game obviously could be delayed into the 2030s? Do you think it will launch in 2029? Tell me in the comments below. And like I said earlier, thank you so much for watching, and for more BioWare gaming and Mass Effect content, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.